Oh, Bradley, good timing. Can you help me hold this door shut by chance? Sure, but why are we desperately holding the door to my home office shut again? Well, you see, I may have accidentally summoned an entire pantheon of mythological creatures. I'm sorry, come again? I said I may have accidentally... No, I understand what you did. I want to know why you did it. Well, I was reading The Serpent's Rise by L.M. Cypher, and I thought maybe I should get to know Mesoamerican mythology a bit better. And you thought summoning every type of monster from that folklore would somehow be a good idea? Well, I figured the best kind of research is experience, right? Finton, I really don't think that's what that advice was referring to.
Oh, hey guys, what's behind the door?
Monsters, Arnold, and lots of them.
Oh, cool. I was just reading The Serpent's Rise, and I was thinking it'd be cool to do research by summoning monsters from that mythology.
See, Bradley? He came to the same conclusion. You're not helping your argument, Finton.
Hi, everybody. Say hello to our new friend. It's an axolotl.
Guys, I'm sure it's really cute, but we're a little busy right now.
This door isn't going to hold. We have to get to the chopper.
We don't have one of those, Arnold. Actually, correction, we do. I summoned one just in case we needed to make a quick getaway. Okay, well, then let's make a run for it. Or, hear me out, you could just end the intro.
We like Finton's idea.
Yeah, Bradley, tell everybody about the podcast before the monsters get out.
Hey, that's a good idea. All right, someone say the name of the show so we can end this intro. None of you remember the show's name, do you? Well, I mean, to be fair, it doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. Can you blame us? Finton, it's literally called the Saved as Draft podcast. How much simpler could it be? Oh, I see what you did there. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 65 of the Saved as Draft podcast. This week's episode is packed with everything you know and love, including our shoutouts, power-up prompt stories, wandering prompt winner, and of course, our featured guest interview. This week, I'm really excited to welcome L.M. Cypher to the show. L.M. is the author of The Serpent's Rise, which is a mythological adventure book for middle-grade readers that takes inspiration from Mesoamerican mythology. The book was released recently and has gone on to sell over 150 copies since launch. Not only that, but LM also wrapped up a successful Kickstarter for the audiobook version recently, which is coming out sooner than you may think. We'll discuss all of this and more during the interview later in the episode. I also wanted to mention that the Indie Ink Fund is hosting a new weekly portal prompt. This one this week is about a library at the end of a hall and a portal that opens into the vast library full of stories. And they want your stories to fill its shelves. For those unaware, the Indie Ink Fund is a publication run by several folks here on Substack, and its goal is to support other writers who are struggling. They even have a website and store now as well with merch, so I'll link to their new prompt and the store in the show notes. Check out the amazing work they're doing and get involved by submitting some of your own work to be featured in a future anthology. All right, and next up is our Community Spotlight. This week's Spotlight is an author by the name of Luden Gray, who I recently got to meet in person at a local author fair last weekend. I got to meet both her and Connor Mancuso during the event, which was awesome. Luden is an author and bookstore manager who writes dark fantasy. At the author fair, she was selling copies of her book titled The Kingdom of Deception, and you know I bought a signed copy immediately. This is a massive book as well. I've got it here on my desk. It clocks in at just over 750 pages. I'm super excited to dive in, and if you're interested to get caught up, her next book, The Executioner Prince, is coming out this year. Now, let's take a look at a quick synopsis for The Kingdom of Deception by Luden Gray. Centuries have passed since God turned his back on humanity. converting Earth into a hellish wasteland for angels that displeased him. The great angelic exodus set fallen angels free to roam and ravage the remnants of civilization, enslaving the weak and ruling with an iron fist. Among the shadows of despair, a few emerged as tyrants, the hallowed fallen, reigning over a broken world. From the ashes of this despair rises Amara Ashenfall, sired by one of the very angels responsible for humanity's torment. When she is summoned into the crucible, a harrowing rite of passage that all sired children must endure, her fate hangs in the balance. Thrust into the heart of the sinister Sanctum Meter, Amara faces a nightmarish transformation into a Nephilim and indoctrination into the ranks of soldiers who serve the hallowed fallen. As the brutal trials of the crucible unfold, Amara finds herself ensnared in a web of violence, betrayal, and intrigue. It is here that she captures the cold, contemptuous gaze of her enigmatic instructor, an arrogant, mysterious man whose disdain for her burns as fiercely as her own hidden desire. Together they are engulfed in a tempest of conflicting loyalties and forbidden passions, each moment a haunting dance on the edge of life and death as she searches for truths he kept hidden. In a world where every choice could lead to salvation or death, Amara's world unfolds before her, truth becoming an ever-shifting kaleidoscope. Will she rise to claim her destiny, or will fate spell the end of everything she holds dear? In this epic clash of wills, love and vengeance collide, and the line between hero and monster blurs into a gripping tale of survival against insurmountable odds. Amazing stuff. Check the show notes for a link to subscribe to Luden Gray here on Substack, and of course, a link to pick up a copy of her book. Next, we'll take a look at this week's shoutouts, or after a quick word from our sponsor. Today's episode of the Saved as Draft podcast is sponsored by The Halls of Pandemonium, a new writing challenge coming in May 2026. Hey, Lord Devereaux, I got here as quick as I could. Is everything okay?
No, Bradley. It is absolutely not okay. We have a very serious situation on our hands.
Well, what is it? What's going on?
Come with me. I'll show you.
Okay, all I see is a boarded up gate. What is this, some kind of garden?
A garden to the untrained eye, perhaps. But to others like myself, this is a doorway, a threshold that has always been here.
Hey, wait a second, a portal? We're not stealing ideas from the Indie Ink Fund, are we?
Of course not. A portal implies a doorway, one that can be opened and shut. This gate has always been here. The realm beyond cannot be sealed, only tamed.
Okay, and let me guess, it's not tame anymore, is it?
It is not. The realm beyond has become, how do you humans put it, hangry.
Oh, wow, okay.
Beyond this gate lies Pandemonium, the source of all ideas, the realm of inspiration, a place of infinite potential, and also the location of my summer home.
Hey, wait a second, you have a summer home?
That's hardly the point.
Right, sorry.
So, what do you say? We'll need to ensure we prepare ourselves accordingly. I will need all able-bodied writers to assist in this endeavor. It should require roughly 1 month of Earth time.
Huh, so the length of a writing challenge.
Yes, I suppose so. A charming coincidence.
Alright, cool, I'll see what I can do. Are you a writer, a poet, or someone who enjoys prompts? A new challenge is coming to the writer's journey in May 2026. The Halls of Pandemonium will test your skills with daily prompts, scoring brackets, and much, much more. Subscribe now to the writer's journey on Substack, and stay tuned for more details. The Halls of Pandemonium open May 1st, 2026. All right, and we're back. Each week, I open a thread in my subscriber chat where you can share links to your latest work. I share these links with Mina Howell and her Penny Dreadfuls podcast, and together we pick several to talk about on our respective shows. For me, that's 5 links selected at random, so let's dive in and see what we got for this week's shoutouts. First up this week is On Entanglement, by Rebecca Watson. This is an excellent piece. It feels a bit like a stream of consciousness, but it has more structure than that. It's sort of a poetic article, if you will. It discusses the concept of quantum entanglement, which is one of the most wild things that we've ever discovered as a species. Albert Einstein once referred to it as spooky action at a distance. And in this piece, Rebecca dives into the concept while also relating it to fiction and to things in our lives that we can't quite explain. Could these things be the result of events happening at the quantum level? Me personally, I'd like to think so. But in general, this piece is a beautiful introduction to a very real concept in quantum mechanics. Let's check out an excerpt. At its core, it's simple. Two particles behave as if they are part of the same system, even when separated by large distances. If you measure one, the other reflects a corresponding state. Not because something traveled between them, not because one caused the other. Just correlation that doesn't behave like anything else in classical physics. No visible bridge, no exchange you can track, no delay you can point to. To make it easier to picture, people often use analogies. Two coins minted from the same mold, flipped in opposite rooms, always landing in related outcomes. Two gloves, separated after production, still knowing they are part of a pair. Or two tuning forks, set to the same frequency. Activate one, and the other begins to resonate without being touched. None of these examples are perfect, but they point to the same idea. Connection doesn't always behave the way proximity suggests. What matters isn't just a shared origin, but that they were never entirely independent states to begin with, mathematically still part of the same system. That's the part that keeps catching my attention. Wow, so good. I love those examples there, and honestly, I haven't mentioned anything on Substack about entanglement in a while, but it's something that I love to talk about when it does come up. So this article was amazing. Huge source of inspiration for me, this concept as a whole, so definitely check it out. You'll find a link in the show notes. Our second shout out this week is The House with No Address by Matthew C. Bryant. This one was excellent. I think the thing that stood out to me the most here was how perfect the writing voice and pacing were in this story. So the writing itself is really strong. It's nice and stylized, and it's confident all the way through. It's also a very polished and pristine piece of work from a technical perspective. I mean, it's great. And the pacing, like I said, is excellent too. We get a nice look into the volatility of the two main characters and their relationship before that horror comes in. Things go from weird to surreal to downright terrifying by the end, and just when you think you can come up for air, the story comes crashing down on you again in the final act. It's really exceptional work, it's fun to read, and it's just really well written, like I said. Let's check out an excerpt. I turned the doorknob slowly, expecting resistance, surprised by the brass's smoothness. The door opened, revealing the warm glow inside. "Babe," she dropped her bags. "It's gorgeous." She skipped to the kitchen and glided her hand along the island. "Quartzite?" "Yeah, the place is pretty nice." I looked around, surprised at the lack of cobwebs. If she finds out I didn't use the app to rent this place, she's going to kill me. The shelves weren't empty. They were crowded with antique trinkets and carved wooden statues. Most statues of dogs, similar in breed to the mutt I saw earlier. All noses pointed towards a small statue in the center of the wall. It reminded me of an old tiki doll. 4 feminine heads facing in different directions, like a compass, eyes represented by black jewels. I felt myself drawn to it, and wanted to hold it in my hands. Getting sucked into the darkness of their eyes, feeling my throat vibrate. Like a dog getting ready to howl. I started to reach for it until... "Babe, this place is a dream," she said, embracing me, staring into me with her ocean eyes. The ones that always melted my heart. "Take a look around, then we can check out the shower when you're ready." She got on tiptoes for a kiss, winked, then exaggerated the swing of her hips while walking away. She always knew how to get me going, pulling my strings like a marionette. Amazing work there. Great excerpt. Be sure to check the show notes for a link. That's a phenomenal read. Our third shout out this week is Rocking the Second Act, or RTSA 38, Don't Encourage Him, by Wendy Russell. So, as you can tell by the title, this is actually the 38th chapter of an ongoing draft, and what's cool about this is that Wendy is actually working on the piece in real time alongside readers. That means that she posts the first draft and then updates it with additions, edits, or changes. It's actually a really cool way to involve the community with the development of the story. And while this is chapter 38, I gotta say it's really easy to jump into, thanks to some amazing narration from Wendy herself. The story is captivating, the dialogue is standout as always with her work, and the characters feel very cohesive and well-defined. You'll find a link to the chapter index as well here, so there's really no reason not to jump in. Let's check out an excerpt. Lisa leaned over and whispered, "I cried the first time I had to do a walk and talk. It's like patting your head, rubbing your stomach, and pretending to be a different person all at once." I laughed, wildly relieved. "Oh, thank God. I thought I was just thick." "You are," she said sweetly, "but in a fun way." Alistair tapped the script with his knuckle. "All right, let's move on. Scene 23, the note." A few scripts rustled. Someone reached for a drink that didn't exist yet, already half in the space. "Take 5 energy," he added. "You're mid-rehearsal. Gary's place. You've been at this a while." That settled it. Not a fresh start. Not polite. Looser. Lived in. Gary comes over. And of course that was the moment Zach pushed off the wall like he'd been waiting all morning. He didn't stroll. He sauntered. I didn't know if there was a difference until that moment. He drifted in, picking up an imaginary glass from the bar as he passed it, clocking the room like it belonged to him, which, technically it did. His gaze landed on me. On Rose. A flicker of recognition, not surprise. Amusement, like he'd already taken her measure and found something worth poking. "Well," he said easily, "this looks productive." Great stuff from Wendy. Check the show notes for a link. There's a lot of fun chapters in that series already, so dive right in. Our fourth shout-out this week is Obviously Oblivious and Unfair Game by Namita Kaul. This one was for one of Alex Dawson's prompts shared during National Poetry Writing Month. It's a split piece where you get 2 poems that offer different perspectives. And like with all of Namita's work, this also includes some original art. I gotta say, the piece here is one of my favorites. It's a collection of watercolor silhouettes and a portrait, and I just love the use of color and perspective. But let's talk about these poems. Both are exceptional as always, and I love how you can feel the conflicting emotions between the two. The first feels more accusatory, while the second feels defeated in a sorrowful way. Reading them both back to back is a truly profound experience. Let's check out an excerpt. "I am simple, doing what I'm told, pampering you, playing my role. Yet you never tell me that you want something more, different from what I've been bringing forth. You punish me with your mute protests, not letting me in, right till the dam wouldn't hold. A tiff that would have been easily resolved with a kiss and perhaps something more. The preconceived affront that I couldn't deliver, the arguments and hate that I never verbalized but was ostracized for." Amazing. Be sure to check that one out. A lot of great emotion in those poems. Remember, you'll find links to all these in the show notes. Our final shout out this week is The Worms Took Less Than You by Spencer D.W. So this is one of Spencer's poems, and for those who haven't read his work, you know what? Just stop listening. Pause the show and go read everything he's done. I am so serious. Spencer is, I'm without exaggerating, one of my favorite horror authors of all time. His poetry also carries that horror that he's known for as well, particularly the use of exceptional imagery that will have any horror veteran squirming in their seat. This piece reflects on a toxic relationship using just insanely good descriptions to drive home the misery, pain, and judgment felt during this time. The rhymes are similarly punchy, adding further weight to the message and providing emphasis that really drives home the deeper themes. I loved this one. It's one of my favorite poems from Spencer, which is really saying something. Let's check out an excerpt. "Count beats and wait for them to stop. Yours or mine, doesn't matter when we're waiting for the other's shoe to drop. Would dying in my sleep give you life? Something to look forward to between me and your next affair with the kitchen knife. Keep coming up with reasons this love left you starving. Why don't you shut up, cut to the quick, and put that gun in my mouth, darling? I'm sure the bullet would find a way to disappoint you. You don't leave. Don't believe. Love was just the blade before the cleave. You called me a worthless, useless version of a human being. You despised the idea of my smile, my levity, denied all I told you I was seeing." Oh, so good. It's dark, as you can tell, but it's really exceptional work. Check it out at the link in the show notes, and thank you again to everyone who submitted links this week. Stay tuned for another shout-out thread in my subscriber chat this coming Tuesday. Next up, we'll take a look at this week's Wandering Prompt winner. Welcome, one and all, to this week's Wandering Prompt Award ceremony. Hey, what's a Wandering Prompt again? Oh, it's that thing where Bradley hides a prompt in the episode. You know, like this. Wandering Prompt, Episode 65. Write a story or poem about a character who finds their soul trapped in the wrong body. 1,000 words or less. The first to post a link in the show comments wins. A second story will be chosen at random from those submitted. Good luck. Oh, okay, I get it. Alright, let's talk about the winner of last week's Wandering Prompt. Thanks, guys. Indeed, last week's winner was Malric Wraithmore with Mars to Major Tom. So this week, the prompt goddess is off saving the world from poor story prompts, so you're just going to have me talking this week. But yes, I wanted to talk a bit about Malric Wraithmore's entry here. This one was really good. Our prompt last week, the Wandering Prompt, was about a group of astronauts in space witnessing nuclear war on Earth and realizing that they were the last ones in the universe. And so with this one, Malric took an approach that I know I've seen before, but it's amazing every time. Basically, the submission here was a sort of poem combined with song lyrics. And that's actually literally true because there's also a song in the post that you can play and listen to that uses the words here as the lyrics along with instruments and whatnot. And it really is a cool experience. And the kind of genre and the vibe feels like this classic sort of sci-fi 80s kind of vibe. And I really, really enjoyed that aspect of it. As always, Malric's poetry, song lyrics, what have you, anytime that they do this kind of writing, it's beautifully well rendered with lots of great imagery and word choice. And I really also enjoy just like kind of the flow and the story that it told here. Again, it just feels like ethereal in the best way possible. So let's check out an excerpt real quick. Mars Control, this is Major Tom. Nothing but static left to the dark. Now we prey on ignition and a spark. Please tell me we are not all that remains of Earth lost past DEFCON 1. Our families, our homes, burned in a nation's pride. All that's left are phantoms. Frozen in the light, they died. So good. Definitely check it out. Like I said, give that song in there a listen to. Really creative stuff here. And thank you as always to Malric for participating in not only the Wandering Prompts, but as we'll find out, the Power Up Prompt this week as well. I really appreciate it. It's time for our Power Up Prompt stories. I have a few here from last week's Fairy Tale Prompt that came in after the podcast last Friday. So we'll do those first, and then we'll dive into this week's entries. And as always, these will be shorter shout-outs focused on what made each story stand out to me. This allows me to discuss all the entries each week so that I'm not limiting who gets talked about on the podcast here. So, first up from last week's Fairy Tale Prompt is The Spirit's Gift by Anton Anderson. This story is set in the same universe as an upcoming branching narrative story Anton is working on, which I am really excited to check out. With this story, I love the structure and how it played into the pacing. The story here has a really nice fairy tale setting, but it's the way Anton uses stylized dividers that really elevated it for me. The story moves fast between every scene, jumping forward in time in a lot of cases to get us to the next major moment. It creates this captivating reading experience that really hooks you in, and I loved it. And also, the concept that the bargain struck with the forest spirits here lets our main character become someone else is really cool. The ending is bittersweet, but I enjoyed how it wrapped things up. It's really solid work, and now I'm even more excited for that upcoming branching narrative. So check it out at the link in the show notes, and stay tuned for that story coming soon from Anton as well. Our second story from last week's prompt is Changing Places by Suparna Chakraborty. This one is really interesting for a couple of reasons. For starters, the main character seems to have partial amnesia and struggles to remember how they arrived at the forest from last week's prompt. This is combined with a first-person POV that's written like journal entries, and I love that combo because it allows the reader to follow along and sort of piece things together alongside the protagonist. As with much of Suparna's work, it achieves some really nice world building and intrigue within a relatively small word count as well. It's always impressive when an author can achieve so much in a short amount of time. Alright, and now we're going to look at this week's power-up prompt stories. This week's power-up prompt was our first ever image prompt. I gave you 3 pictures and let you take them wherever you'd like as inspiration in your story. I picked 1 photo for your setting, 1 for your character, and 1 for your conflict. I chose free images from Unsplash so they could be used freely, and I didn't even realize that the blurry supermarket one that I picked was actually a Buc-ee's. And that actually ended up being a really fun element from the sounds of it. So let's dive in and talk about some of these stories, including one set in an actual Buc-ee's. First up for this week's prompt, and of course, it's The Buc-ee's at the Edge of Forever by J.M. Gooding. You see what I mean? That picture ended up being a really good choice. So in this story, I love how J.M. also mentions the iconic brisket sandwich right off the bat. And in the first paragraph, there's some really inspired imagery. He describes the woman behind the counter as having, quote, hair the color of weak tea, which I thought was a really cool description. As we get into the story here, though, J.M. really establishes a nice and surreal atmosphere. Things begin to feel very liminal in the way that the space around the protagonist is described and how it behaves. This Buc-ee's is clearly not normal, but a lot of the things you would expect are here. It's the perfect line between familiar and strange. By the end, he pulls in elements of the other images as well, including the biker, of course, and the strange swirling light. The reveal here is actually perfect, and honestly, this entire thing feels like an episode of a classic anthology show. Specifically, the vibes I got here reminded me of The Outer Limits back in the day, which I really loved. It's also got a tinge of that fear of the unknown, but it's that mixture of the liminal strangeness with that gave this piece a really cool and very unique identity. And of course, JM at the end mentions this is the second week in a row that he hasn't subverted a prompt, and I think that is a record, as you said, my friend. Really, really cool story to start off the entries for this week. Thank you to Jam for that one. Next up is Lock In Chat by Wendy Russell. With this piece, Wendy showcases her ability to write a story with gripping pacing and top-notch dialogue. The concept here is a live stream where the characters are playing something called Pack and Save Bingo. Not only do we get all the banter from the characters in the store setting, but Wendy also weaves in interjections from the fictional live stream's chat as well, which adds even more layers to the dialogue. And of course, Wendy's dialogue is always authentic to the period and setting, so case in point, this story has a lot of Gen X and Gen Z terminology and phrases, which really added to the authentic feel of the piece. Like, I could see this really being like a transcript from a Twitch stream that happened anytime within the last couple of months. It's wild, and I really loved it for that reason. And of course, there's an undertone of something sinister here, pulling in the more surreal image I included in this prompt. I love how that element was woven in without disrupting the flow of the story. This is a very layered piece with that pitch-perfect dialogue that pulls you in. And again, it's a reminder that Wendy really knows what she's doing when it comes to dialogue, so really great stuff here. Next up is Meet Cutes in the Time of Brisket and Wormholes by Hallie Jules. So with this entry, Hallie provided narration, actually, which I'm excited to talk about. And like some of the other entries this week, Hallie leaned into the Buc-ee's image that I provided. And her narration here has a southern accent, too, that kind of reflects where most Buc-ee's are located. I love that. The writing style here is amazing. There's this really well-defined voice and tone right off the bat that makes our narrator feel like a grounded part of the world. The narration emphasizes this as well. It adds even more character and charm to our protagonist. And since Hallie is known for her comedy writing, I gotta say, the jokes here were amazing. The narrator of the story tosses in all kinds of personal opinions and observations throughout, and it just adds, again, more of that flavor and comedy to the story. I gotta say, the whole time I was either smiling or straight up laughing out loud. It was fantastic. And once we get situated, the story introduces us to the biker character from one of the photos, and things quickly take a turn into the realm of quantum mechanics. Second time that's come up this week. And yes, it gets wild in a very, very cool way. And so you have this comedy combined with high stakes that just works perfectly here. This is a story packed to the brim with character, and it's well paced enough to keep you locked in all the way through. Be sure to check out the narration as well. It's even better than a Buc-ee's brisket sandwich. And trust me, I love those. Big shout out to Hallie. That was great work this week. Next up for this week's Power Up Prompt Stories is Parallax by Mary Ellen Brady. Mary Ellen showcases a few strong elements of this piece. For starters, the opening is excellent. It sets the stage and it establishes a ton of intrigue, and it does it all in 2 sentences. Let me read those 2 sentences for you. The thermal case strapped to Anika's back weighed 4 pounds and paid $800 every run. She never asked what was inside. All right, just like that. I'm wondering, who is Anika? What is this case? And what could possibly be inside? That right there is how you lock in readers, my friends. It's a great opening. And from there, we get a few paragraphs of exposition before Mary Ellen throws us right into the scene. Some imagery sets up the surroundings, but she throws us into the action almost immediately once that stage is set. And alongside the action, Mary Ellen introduces beautiful scientific concepts portrayed with just enough complexity where it doesn't alienate readers. It's a really beautiful balance that she's very good at, and it adds to the intrigue. It all leads to some truly tense final moments as well, and an ending that will leave you breathless. I really loved the abrupt stop. That was a nice touch. Coming up next this week is Aisle 7 Incident Report by Bent But True. And I love the collage he did with the images from the prompt for this one. That was a nice touch right off the bat. And with this story, I was a big fan of how it pairs the mundane with the strange and surreal. That contrast works really well when it's done right. And in this case, the characters are experiencing things that are entirely outside the realm of normal, but they react like it's another day on the job. For example, one customer complains about an aisle in the store looping back on itself and being quote-unquote too long, and the employee is hung up on whether or not he got the foil he was looking for. I love the dynamics like that. It makes for great, funny dialogue, but it also adds to that world building at the same time. And I have to give special attention to the ending as well. The way Bent But True raises the stakes of the story and then brings back that corporate commentary in the final moments is brilliant. It ties everything together beautifully, and that final line is so good. I loved this one. Next up is Wings of Suburbia, a short story. And at this point, Malric's featured images are starting to look more like restaurant menus than anything, because this story uses 11 images, a text prompt, and a music video as its total sources of inspiration. I'm so serious. Malric impresses me more and more every week with how they manage to level up and incorporate even more prompts and inspiration into their work. It's a really cool thing to see and very inspiring. Also, the gunship song that Malric included in this piece is a beautiful pairing. It works so great with the story, and I could see how it inspired it. And what I love about this story is how Malric captured the surreal and dreamlike nature of the images I included in the prompt. The way the scenes are divided up in this story with the shifts in setting and tone, all of it makes me feel like I'm floating through this world on currents that I don't fully understand, and it's a very cool feeling as you're reading it. And the sense of speed here is wonderful as well. The biker image is used to inspire some really amazing scenes that have a true sense of momentum in the writing. And that liminality that I mentioned in some of the other entries comes through here as well, pulling us through each scene like it's a passage and not a destination. Things take a dark turn as well near the end with some very intense imagery that gives way to a sort of reflective final segment. And when you put it all together, this story really is a journey, and I loved every minute of it. Great work from Malric this week. All right, and our final power-up prompt story this week is The Hunger Between Shelves by Mike McClure, aka Every Root, Every Thorn. This story is another example of doing your opening right. With this one, we find out almost immediately that our protagonist, as the story puts it, is a former grocery worker turned world tree. Okay, Mike, you've got my attention. It's a really nice premise, and the setup is excellent. What I loved, too, is how this story transitions to another POV, and it's done really smoothly within the story. We find ourselves in the shoes, later on, of a professional killer, and in this case, the biker from one of the prompt's images. The POV switches between these two later in the story, and it does so without interrupting the flow, which I appreciated. Not easy to do either. And by the end, Mike incorporates another prompt from a publication whose name rhymes with Indie Ink Fund, and I love that touch. I did not expect that, but it looks like we got another Malric on our hands here. Well, thank you again to Mike for that amazing story. That's another great one. Every story this week was just incredible, and again, this was our first ever image-based power-up prompt, and I gotta say, it was a huge success. Thank you to everyone who entered, and stay tuned for a new power-up prompt tomorrow, possibly one from a guest author. I'll save the surprise, but if they are able to write this one, I have a feeling it's going to be a good one. Next up is our weekly writing discussion, but first, a quick, mindful moment. Hey there. This is Chill Bradley, here with this week's Mindful Moment. Here's a quote to consider. The two most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why. Mark Twain. As human beings, I think we're all seeking purpose. I know I am. I've spent most of my life trying to figure out the why of it all. Why am I here? Why is any of this here? There has to be a deeper meaning to all of this. And sure, you could argue there's no point to any of it, but I don't personally find that much value in a nihilistic mindset. And if you do, that's great, but I need to feel like there's a reason for all of this, and I feel like a lot of people do too. A point. A purpose, if you will. And for me, the purpose is simple. I'm here to tell my stories and to support my fellow creatives. I want to change the world by creating better ones and then doing what I can to make the world we live in a better place as well. Thanks for joining me on this journey. Now, back to the show. All right, and we're back. Every week I open a thread on Wednesdays for us to discuss a writing topic, and you know the drill. If you take the time to respond, I'll take the time to read your answers on the show. This week I asked you all to talk about what inspiration, if any, you take from mythology, like this week's featured guest. So let's dive in and see what everybody said. First up, Jennifer Jorgensen says, I love mythology and I've read a lot of it from different cultures. I'm sure that it has shaped some of my writing and thinking. That said, I don't usually use it directly in my work, but using gods is occasionally an awfully handy deus ex machina, and I've done that once or twice. No, I think I'm the same way. I have some, kind of knowledge of like Greek mythology, Norse mythology, but I don't typically go straight to that for my work either. That being said, I do love some of the themes that come through in those things. I love reading that kind of stuff. And yes, I agree that gods, do make for a very handy deus ex machina. It's been a while since I've heard that term, but yes, I love that. So thank you, Jennifer. It's a great answer to start us off. Next up, Mercedes D. Santiago says, well, writing Synodaria, I have been researching about distant past Spanish mythology, from Celtics, Iberians, or pre-Romans in general. There's a rich pre-Roman mythology which got mixed with Roman and early Christian that actually got featured in some cases in the Synodaria 1 and 2. I know, I'm Spanish, and so you can argue this is my own, but these characters are so lost in history that it's really difficult to find them. So I can argue back saying they are so distant in time, they can be considered something different to actual known Spanish mythology. No, I love that, and I think it's totally fair, Mercedes, to kind of blur the lines there. And again, it's not like mythology's copyright, right? You can take inspiration from it, you can kind of work with it, you can use it in the way that works for you. That's a completely valid approach, so I really appreciate that response there. Next up, Vision to Verse says, I'm most drawn to Anubis and Anansi from Egyptian and African mythology. Ooh, yes, definitely. You don't see as much of those kind of mythologies used these days as I would like, honestly. So yeah, definitely. I recognize one of those names, but not both. I'll have to look them up. Very good stuff. Thank you. J.W. Myers says, I haven't publicly shared any of it yet, but I have a few things that draw on folklore and mythology, like retellings for children and a novella. While the children's stories are retellings, I went a different way for the novella. It focuses more on ideas and symbols that would be familiar to the culture and mythos. I mostly lean into Mesoamerican and Germanic myth and folklore because of my family, and because they're the most familiar and homey to me. I haven't written anything that intentionally draws from other cultures, though, so I'd much rather hear and learn from others about their process. No, that's great. I love it. It's like they say, always write what you know, right? But no, that sounds really interesting. I love the idea of children's stories being used as retellings because you can recontextualize a lot of things for that audience. And so I'm interested in how you approach that. But then also the novella sounds really good too. Yeah, definitely a lot of interesting elements here. And it sounds like it's going to be really nice and authentic because it, as you said, it's, related to your family and it feels, as you said, homey to you. That's really cool. I'm excited for that. Next up, Matthew C. Bryant says, had a phase where I was really into Norse and Greek mythology. I think the biggest thing I took from it all was the personification of flawed gods and the complicated relationships they had with humans. Depending on the piece, there will be some sort of conflict or challenge between the MC and the gods. Did a Viking piece where MC said he'd piss in Odin's beard. Oh wow, okay. That's that takes some serious courage to say that to Odin. Can't imagine how that went. That does sound interesting though, to be honest. All right. Next up, Wendy Russell says, I am loving reading everyone's responses here. It reminds me what a rich vein of inspiration there is to tap into. As a Kiwi, we have some beautiful Maori and Polynesian myths and legends to work with, many of them creation stories. Oh, and we also have our own Bigfoot legend, the Mohau Man, who is said to roam the Mohau Ranges on the east coast of the North Island. I am going to do some research on him/them and then maybe weave that into a story. Well, Wendy, that sounds absolutely amazing. I had no idea that there was a Bigfoot legend over in that side of the world. So, yeah, stay tuned for that. I'm really excited to see what Wendy does with that. Next up, J.M. Gooding says, I think we are inspired by mythology whether we mean to be or not. It's kind of a requirement of storytelling. A road story? That's the Odyssey. Monster stories? Myths full of them. How many Helen of Troy tragic chick flicks are there? We've been remixing old stories for a long time. Kira, my muse, is a big part of what I write on Substack. She's not really pulled from any specific myth. She's a third inspiration, a third calibration, and a third trepidation. She's not a classical muse, but there's influence there. She shows up, derails things a little, and refuses to behave the way a classical muse is supposed to. But if I'm being honest, I'm not so much inspired as conspired against. On writing outside your own culture, I think it's pretty simple. Do the work or don't do it. If you're there for surface level aesthetics, it shows. If you understand what you're working with, it also shows. You don't have to overcomplicate it, just don't be lazy about it. Yeah, really good point from JM there, and that's something I forgot to mention at the beginning of the segment here, but I did ask as part of this discussion if anybody had any thoughts on writing in other cultures that are not your own, and that's something our guest this week will talk about, but I agree with JM Gooding here. It's one of those things where it's like, if you're going to do it, then put in the work, talk to the people, do your research, because if you don't, it will show. Great points from JM there. Next up, Kate M. Sine says, excited for you to speak with LM Cypher. A big fan of their work. I love mythology and feeling myself pulling from Medusa, Prometheus, Artemis, and Hecate. Well, thank you, Kate. I am really excited to get to that part of the show as well, and for people to hear it. The interview with LM Cypher is fantastic. It is worth the hype. And regarding your response here, I love some of these different figures that you pull from here. I myself am working on something involving Prometheus, but I haven't announced what it is yet, so a little teaser there. Next up, Anton Anderson says, I don't have time to study mythology. I already have a long list of books to read. If I didn't have to find a job, I would have totally read everything there is about mythology. And honestly, Anton, yes, I think we can all agree with that. There is not enough time in the world. So usually when people are inspired by mythology, it tends to be just one because they only have time to, really dive deep into one. So yeah, I sympathize with that answer a lot. Next up, Dr. Noir A. Yanga here says, to a degree, all human culture is transferable. It is always transient and in a state of flux. You can get a fix on it at any specific point in time, but it is changed the minutes you start thinking about it as culture. I'm writing Arabian Nights stories, but those stories are not strictly speaking Arabian only. The time they originate from was marked by intercultural transference. Arabian, Persian, Indian, North African, and Chinese influences abounded. That's a really good point. I like this response a lot. Yeah, it's one of those things where, when you're working, especially with something like that, where it's inspired by a time of lots of different cultures kind of coming together, you'll have to kind of think about that, in terms of how you blend those together and where those inspirations came from and how to kind of pay homage to all those things. Really good point there. It's one of those things where it's, based on the time period and the mythology, it goes a lot deeper and it's a lot more complex than you would think. So I love that. Response here from Christy says, I think it's fun to think about other takes and worlds. Yeah, absolutely. Like J.M. Gooding said earlier, we kind of do it without realizing it. It's lots of inspiration there in mythology. Next up, Every Root, Every Thorn says, I love the use of mythology, but I like to twist it because so often the real myths are insights into the messed up values of the people telling them, and they really need a mirror held up to them instead of making the story nice. I also think it is important to understand that many myths are the foundation of moral stories, and so by whitewashing them, it is very easy to put bad ideas into acceptable packages. Yes, really, really good point there from Mike McClure, aka Every Root, Every Thorn. Yeah, great response here, and kind of honing in on the true purpose of certain stories in mythology, kind of the reasoning behind them, and why it's important to take that into account and respect that. So really good point there. Next up, Richard Loader says, I use a lot of mythological aspects in my stories, also folklore, cryptids, and things like tarot and zodiacs too. And yes, if you have yet to check out Richard Loader's work, it is fantastic. I have seen several of those things in the works that I've read, so that's a great response there. Thank you. Next up, Mina Howell says, oh, I love this question. In my eco-fiction stories, I've been known to base them on Native American legends, but lately, I've been pulling from demonology to write my Infernoverse stories. It's been really fun to research and incorporate what I find into my own style of writing. Whatever I draw from, I try to use in a respectful way. Yeah, fantastic answer. And I can think off the top of my head of some stories that Mina has done that pulled from Native American legends. And it's really cool because it ties into her eco-fiction or eco-horror, where it kind of pays respect, or the characters in the story are kind of have to pay the price for not paying respect to the planet and to the environment. And so that's really interesting. And yes, her Infernoverse stories are amazing as well. The demonology aspect really makes them feel rooted in that universe, which is kind of like a modern sort of noir twist on Dante's Inferno. Definitely check out that as well. And thank you to Mina for the response. Next up, Chris B. Writes says, yes, this is my poem, Persephone Laughs. And there's a link here. I haven't read this one yet, but definitely check it out. You'll find it in the thread here from last week's writing discussion. And I will be giving it a read too. It's called Persephone Laughs by Chris B. Writes. Next up, Alfred Wayman says, love the classics and the works of Homer and the playwrights of the Greeks. I'm a huge fan of the old-time Joseph Campbell. His books blew my mind as a young adult and have shaped my life for sure. No, I love that. And I love when an author can really kind of shape you as an author as well. It's really good stuff. So thank you, Alfred, for that response. And next up, somebody I know who was excited to answer this, J. Allen Winchester says, cracks knuckles. Okay, apologies for the long answer, but this is my wheelhouse, and don't I know it. Mythology isn't just my niche corner storytelling, it is my faith. When I was in late elementary school, I was going through a crisis of faith. I was asking questions in Sunday school that my teachers and church elders were not comfortable answering, and I felt I was being a bad person to even ask after the way they scolded me. My parents were deeply rooted in their own faith, so I was scared of getting punished for being a bad Christian. Fortunately, my father was a saint, and after finally getting me to open up and the consequential meltdown that ensued, he asked me a question that changed my life forever. If you aren't a Christian, what are you? He validated the reality that not everyone shares the same faith, and he encouraged me to research other faiths to see what called me. I'd already discovered Greek mythology in the encyclopedia, so I started reading more into it. I realized that there were other mythologies in the world, so I started with moon myths, since I was drawn to the satellite even as a little kid. The Moon Princess of Japanese mythology was a story I had heard while we lived there a few years before, and that led me to, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, I apologize, Tsukuyomi no Mikoto, their moon god. I started reading up on other moon deities, and I started to realize that the mythologies had a lot in common with variances based on the culture and their connection to the world around them. My gifted brain drew parallels to older versions of myths and how these stories evolved alongside humanity. I found that there was something reaching out to humanity, and they were translating the message in their language and experience. By the time I was a high school freshman, I realized the meaning of divinely inspired. After my first college try, I learned the roots of the hero's journey came from ancient Greek theater, which were depictions of mythology shared with the public. This led me to attempt to flesh out my third triad saga, Dodecatheon, with more cultural details. I read up on ancient Greece and its influence on the world over the millennia. Again, I found fascinating correlations to other faiths and current storytelling, shaping how humanity connected to the stories and its importance. Throughout my 20s, I researched other mythologies from across the world, and I felt compelled to bring back the sense of wonder these sagas and epics once held before being dismissed by modern literature as primitive. It's why I develop my worlds before I really start drafting installments. As for other cultures, I am a military child, so I learned to appreciate other cultures from a young age through direct contact with people from those countries. I love how vibrant other countries and their festivals and stories were. When I would meet someone especially passionate, I listened closely to learn all I could about the paths they walk. I still enjoy writing stories passed to me, and my hope is to paint a picture for readers to connect with them through my adaptations. My approach is to listen to the people from those cultures, or at least observe. I was a people watcher growing up, and I still find this is more valuable than just reading about the countries. I feel it is the core of my character-driven storytelling. Where I think I vary from many mythology writers today is that I hear these voices from the great mystery, universal subconscious, the source, or any other name for where the divine calls. I have felt stories given to me, guided through character arcs, and even compelling presences pushing me to write. I once sat with my altars with an offering to the dragons and fae, asking for help writing the ending to Nature Calls Autumn with the promise of writing a dragon-inspired saga given to me previously. I got hit with the intense third act, and the path into winter was revealed to me. I know that my experience sounds strange to those who do not share my faith, but when I have shared it with other pagans or even Christians, they agree there is a divine inspiration taking hold of my hands to create the worlds that I do. It's why I feel writing is my calling, and I wish I could dedicate more of my energy to it around trying to make ends meet. I always look forward to J. Allen or Jaden Winchester's responses every time I do one of these, and I really, really hoped that he would find the time to share his thoughts on this mythology topic this week. And folks, I mean, what can I say? This was incredible. I mean, not only was it amazing to learn more about him and his childhood, learning more about his faith, learning more about how these stories affected him and how he channels them. I mean, beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And it was my honor to read it here on the show. So thank you, Jaden, as always, for sharing your thoughts. Next up, Clara McGuffin says, almost everything I write is shaped by folklore and myth, and much of the nonfiction I publish here is as well. I'm careful about writing on traditions beyond those I can honestly say I know well enough to represent responsibly. I've even hesitated to post fairy tales from languages and traditions I know little about, because I have seen how poor many translations can be in cases where I can read the original. I do not want to add to that problem or help circulate distorted versions of these stories. Much of the folklore we have was recorded by people who did not belong to the communities they were writing about. For many readers, folklore suggests a fairy tale world of household spirits and trolls set in some misty antiquity. The problem with that image is that it shrinks the people who lived with these beliefs. It turns them into something childlike or naive, instead of recognizing them as flesh and blood human beings. The way we imagine folk belief is also the way we imagine the people who carried it. I'm working on a post about this because it irks me when some writers treat other people's beliefs as decorative gloss in their stories. Wow. Yes. Thank you so much, Clara, for that answer as well. I really love what Clara honed in on here in terms of paying the proper respect to folklore, to other cultures, and making sure that it's not just set dressing, and also that connection that Clara mentioned between how you treat these stories compared to the people who believe in them, and how disrespecting one disrespects the other. Incredible. Really great input there from Clara. Thank you again for that answer. That was amazing. All right. And last, but certainly not least, my other mythologically in-tuned friend, Isabella Neshawat, came in here at the end of the thread and says, cackles in my entire publication, which is called Mythos. To be honest, I don't know how to not get inspired by mythology, LMAO. Once you crack that surface, you can see it literally everywhere. I got so deep, I started seeing trees as dryads, streams as naiads, and music on the wind was sirens. Love mythology. It will never cease to amaze me, perplex me, fascinate me, and inspire me. Hop on over to Mythos if you want to read some usually gay and almost always sad Greek mythology retellings. And I love that plug, and I have to second that. Isabella's publication is phenomenal. If you get a chance, please get yourself a copy of her debut book, Turning and Turning. It is a collection of stories inspired by mythology, retellings of mythological stories, and poetry as well. It is one of my favorite collections of all time. I cannot properly describe how much I love that book. So definitely check that out. And thank you to Isabella for closing us out here with a wonderful response to this week's discussion. And thank you again to everyone for sharing all those answers this week. I think this may have been the most successful one yet. It looked like there were 32 total responses. I, of course, skipped over some of the conversations since those don't make sense out of context. So definitely jump in, check it out. And as always, stay tuned for a new writing discussion thread this coming Wednesday. And now it's time for our featured guest interview. My guest this week is someone who I've been following for over a year now. They recently published a book called The Serpent's Rise, and they're currently working on finalizing a full audiobook version as well. This is an author and artist who cares deeply about representing other cultures and doing so in ways that pay homage to their stories. Now, here's the thing. I love every single interview that I have done on this show, but I gotta say, this one is one of my favorites yet. So, without further delay, let's dive into this week's featured guest interview. All right, everybody. This week on the Saved as Draft podcast, I'm very excited to welcome to the show L.M. Cypher. Thank you for being here, my friend.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
Very excited to have you here. So let's have you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your creative journey thus far.
So my name is L.M. Cypher, obviously. I am the author of Jordan Gazia's and the Age of Monsters, but I also write a little bit of poetry, and mostly I kind of bop around in my little historic city and I give ghost tours. And my creative journey has been a lot of I guess sort of disenfranchisement with the process of traditional publishing and striking out on my own, becoming an independent publisher, becoming an independent author, and sort of finding my own little niche within the publication industry and sort of realizing what was best for me and my timeline and my work going forward.
Okay. Very nice. Very nice. So do you remember the first story that you ever wrote? And if so, do you remember what it was about?
I certainly do. This is a little bit embarrassing.
Yeah.
I was 7 years old and I had these two characters. One was named Jessica and one was named Star, and they were half sisters. And Jessica was super normal and Star was like super magical. And it was just sort of about their chaotic adventures together when they were trying to like maintain this sibling identity with one another, but also had a wide disparity between what they could do and how they appeared in the world.
Interesting. Okay. And how old were you when you wrote that first story?
I was 7.
7. Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, for me, my first story was until like second grade. I don't know what age I was, but yeah, 7. That's wild. Very
I think
creative.
second grade to 7.
Yeah, is that about right?
Yeah, second grade to 7, 8.
Okay, cool. All right, good stuff. Good stuff. No, I love that though. I always like asking that question. Some people remember, some people don't, so it's always great when they do. So for my next question here, I wanted to talk a little bit about how you also do artwork and illustrations for your work. So you're a writer and an artist, which is always a very powerful combination, in my opinion. I'm not good at drawing or, anything like that at all. But yeah, so how did you kind of get into doing art for your work? Was it something where it happened around the same time as you started writing, or did it come later, or what's the process there?
So I've been writing all of my life. I've always been just a storyteller, but I've also always loved creating art and illustrations. And I really wanted to pursue art more when I was in middle and high school. But I was, caught up doing like band and theater. And then I finally really started taking art classes in like my sophomore to junior year of high school. And at that point in time, I realized that I really had a knack for it. And at that point in time, I was deciding between theater and law as a major when I went off to college.
Yeah.
And sometime during my senior year, a lot of things happened. It was like a huge year of transition. We moved houses and a lot of things got super crazy for me. And I realized that what I wanted to do was in the creative space, but it wasn't acting. And so I said, you know what? Scrap the whole idea. We're going to art school. So I actually did pursue fine arts as my major in undergrad. And I was a dual concentration between graphics and illustration with a minor in art history. So I have a very like watercolor-esque kind of style. And it took me a couple years to figure out how to transfer that over to digital art.
Right.
But I figured it out pretty well. So for me, when I sat down and I knew that I was going to be publishing my own book, it was a no-brainer that I was going to draw the cover.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's so cool. I love that so much. Also, a bit of a tangent, but you mentioned that you were in band. I was in band too back in the day. What instrument did you play? Oh, okay, yeah, same question. I played French horn myself. What did you play?
I played the flute.
The flute. Okay, nice. Good stuff. Yeah, I was super curious as soon as you said that.
It's like the band kids. We just see each other and we know. It's this innate understanding.
Yeah. Were you ever in were you ever in like marching band at all, or were you like more just concert band?
I was always in concert band in the youth symphony.
Okay.
If I had a marching band at my high school, I would assuredly have been pushed into it,
Yeah.
but I really wanted to quit by that time. I was not super into the flute and I was super into drawing.
That makes sense. Yeah, yeah. I had a similar kind of thing where it was like I enjoyed it for a while and I was in marching band and I look back on it like, how did I do any of that? Because it was so complicated
Right.
memorizing everything, you know? But yeah, at a certain point, I much like you, I wanted to be a writer pretty much my whole life. So it was like, okay, I need to like, shift focus here, getting into college and whatnot. So but that's great. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of your art, so I wanted to ask kind of how that all came together. It's really
Oh,
cool.
thank you.
So going back to your writing then real quick here, my next question for you is what genres of writing for people who aren't familiar with your work, what genres of writing do you primarily write and do you like to experiment with other genres or do you kind of just stick to what you know?
So I would say that my primary focus, especially for this project, is folklore, mythological adventure, thriller, and very like middle grade focused.
Mm,
However, for those who know me outside of Jordan Casillas, they would say that I'm a horror author
interesting. Okay.
and that it takes people by surprise
Yeah.
for those who only know me again from the middle grade project.
Right.
But rest assured, those who have had the fortune, misfortune, not really sure which, of being at my table as a DM, they will tell you under no uncertain circumstances that I am a horror creator. But like I said, I also do a little bit of poetry, and
Mm,
I do like to explore other genres. I think that as an author, you should always be pushing yourself
hmm.
and trying to learn more about different genres. I also work in the nonfiction sphere as well, doing more like anthropological and mythological research and sort of like storytelling.
Okay. Wow, that's awesome. So how did you find yourself kind of interested in those things like, like mythology or some of the nonfiction stuff? Was it stuff like that you were always interested in, or was there a certain point where you kind of latched onto it?
So when I was 8 years old, I was traveling down to Richmond with my family.
Hmm.
And we stopped by this big bookstore, symposium thing. It was huge.
Yeah.
And as we were going through, I saw this book of Greek myths, and it had a big Medusa on the front cover. And it was just the myths and legends told in a very sort of academic kind of way.
Hmm.
But I begged my mom for it because it just looked cool. And I took it home, devoured the entire thing. And after that, it was like I was just done. We studied myths and legends in fifth grade with American myths and legends and Native American storytelling.
Hmm.
And then we studied it again in sixth grade in the context of Greek myths. And by then, I was like the little class resident expert. And from there, it just sort of snowballed into this oral tradition of storytelling. And I found myself just more and more interested in the intersection between how we get stories, how we represent stories, and what stories mean to us as people.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I like that. Thank you for sharing. That's amazing. So yeah,
Thank
that
you.
actually goes well into my next question here, which is I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into kind of some of the themes and sort of lessons and takeaways that you hope readers get from your writing. Like, what are some of those deeper messages that you try to convey?
I mean, the first one is that we are always going to be more similar than we ever are going to be different from one
Mm,
another.
hmm.
I think that that is sort of a core piece of the work that I create. The second is that there are a lot of different things that make us uniquely human,
Hmm.
and understanding the complexities there are what help us to be empathetic to one another. And I think also just that having an understanding and an appreciation for different cultures and the storytelling of those cultures also helps increase that empathy. And just to be able to like better connect to one another
Hmm.
despite having these things that might seem like great divides.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And that actually also reminds me of a conversation that you and I had. I think it was last year, like right after we had initially met on Substack, and I read some of your work. We were talking about kind of the importance of preserving culture through storytelling and stuff like that. And we were discussing a few examples. Like I know I brought up that one game called Never Alone that was about one of the tribes in Alaska. And based on their folklore and stuff like that. So I just love that your work is kind of taking a similar kind of approach in terms of like, because stories immortalize anything that's within them, right? So, I really, really love and respect that aspect of your storytelling. I think that's amazing.
Thank you. And I think that the other part about it too is that, especially to be candid, as like white folks, we're not necessarily taught how to engage with other cultures.
Yeah.
And, sometimes I think that we find it a bit of a barrier if there's a difference in language or a difference in theme. And so finding an accessible way to approach, another culture, another set of stories, and finding a way to sort of digest it respectfully
Yeah.
is also like a big facet of this work as well, where it's like most people that I come across probably don't know a ton about the Aztec pantheon.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think many people can, like off the top of their head would just be like, oh yeah, Huitzilopochtli, the sun god. He's the main guy, right?
Right.
That's just not in everybody's lexicon. And
Mm-hmm.
so finding a way to sort of drip that knowledge and, make it, like I said, accessible so that people have like a little point to just dive in deeper,
Mm.
and also making like my research available so that I can show the primary sources that I received all of my information from,
Yeah.
so that other people can, have that little platform in order to take the next step on their own.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you bring up a really good point about, how like it can be difficult to have that like kind of accessible entry point to other cultures, like especially like if you're genuinely interested, it's like where do you even start? So I guess, a great question that I have for you, now after hearing your answer is how do you approach kind of the research aspect of this? Like do you go like is it, obviously online research I imagine is part of it, but like how, do you talk to people that are, within the culture? Like what's the process like for you, especially, as you're working on stuff like this?
So, first and foremost, I definitely talk to people in the culture. I have a cultural editor for that
Yeah.
exact reason. Like folks who are a little bit more in tune with things than I am. That's also where the beta reading comes in
Hmm.
hugely into play. But for the research aspect, it's sort of like you sit down and you have these arcs of the story,
Hmm.
and maybe what your character might be like on like the surface level, what their characterization might be. And I find that when I'm approaching a project like this, especially because you don't want to tell the stories of another culture for them, like
Right.
that's not my place.
Right.
And so for me, it's like the way that story is interwoven is in a way that feels meaningful, but at the same time, you could kind of swap in any story instead if you needed to. Like, um, when it comes to like the shapeshifting aspect, almost every culture has a shapeshifter story. Almost every culture has some sort of like gray morality figure that walks the line between good and evil.
Hmm.
And so I'm tapping into universal sort of constants, but I'm using specific names for them.
Mm.
So when it comes to the research, what I like to do is sort of like map out the general plan. This is how things are going to go. And then I look really deep into the folklore. And that's when I start parsing through, okay, what are the rules of this mythology? How does it operate? What could it be? And then that's when I start sort of parsing through, because a lot of times with this stuff, stories might contradict. A
Hmm.
really good example is with Quetzalcoatl.
Hmm.
So he's the main snake guy. He's one of the four like main gods. And he, at some point in time, sort of diverges from the Aztec mythology into like a Toltec version. And that's when he gets the blended legend of the priest king of Tolan,
Mm.
which is something that comes up in the book as his characterization of the evening star.
Hmm.
Now, in the pure like Aztec version of the mythology, he is actually the morning star and his brother is the evening star, and they sort of exist in this co-balance between one another.
Mm.
But because Quetzalcoatl is the only god that really comes into play in the story so far, it was easier to synthesize the blended legend and to opt for that one. And so it's like understanding why you're using the folklore that you're using
Mm.
and plugging it in where it makes sense. And that's also why I have the companion podcast to kind of expand on all of it. That's a
Absolutely.
very long-winded answer to what you asked, but
No, I love it. I love the in-depth answer, and I see this attention to detail reflected in your work. So it's really cool to kind of hear the, the behind the scenes, if you will. Um, so I appreciate
Thank
that. You actually, you also mentioned the podcast that you have as well. I had forgotten to like put that in my list of questions. So yeah, I'd love to talk about that for a quick second. If you could tell everybody kind of what the podcast is about and how they can find it.
So the podcast is The Book, the Myth, the Legend, and the premise is that it goes through chapter by chapter and does a deep dive
Hmm.
onto sort of the folklore of the story. So, like Gaspar the Waxman, who appears in chapter one, I go through and I explain where that legend originates from, how it translated across cultures, and same with Jordan being a Nahual. Like I go through and I talk about the history of the Nahual, some of the differing opinions on how like a Nahual was created and what it might or might not mean depending on which region you're in.
Okay, nice. And obviously, we're going to talk about your book here soon. But do you recommend reading the book first and then listening to the podcast, or what's the proper order there?
Oh, definitely read the book first
Okay,
because there are some
spoilers.
spoilers
I
in the
figured.
podcast.
Okay,
Absolutely.
okay.
And I come with like a little warning every single time. I'm like, hey guys, there's spoilers ahead. Like, put this down if you haven't read ahead already. But it's actually kind of on a little there. We still have 4 episodes left for book one,
Mhm.
and the audiobook is taking precedence over this currently.
That's
So
fair.
this will come out hopefully by the end of the summer. The entire season one will be finished, and then it'll get us caught up with Serpent's Rise.
Okay, awesome. Okay, yeah, I always want to make that super clear in case somebody stumbles on the podcast before the book. It's like read the book first, then the podcast.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Yeah.
Okay, got it, got it. Okay, great. So for my next question here, wanted to talk about your experience on Substack thus far. Like, how long have you been in the community, and then what's your experience so far being part of the community here on Substack?
So I've been here for just a little bit over a year,
Nice.
and that has been super exciting. I have found that this community is incredibly supportive. Um, I have found a lot of really good friends through
Hmm.
Substack, and I've come to know some people really, really well. And that has been absolutely phenomenal. Substack generally as a platform has been a little bit disappointing recently,
Yeah,
just with sort of some of the voices that they're uplifting and some of the people that they choose to champion.
yeah.
And that's why I can't necessarily say that I recommend Substack, but I recommend the people on Substack and the authors that I've come to know in my little corner of the platform,
Hmm.
just because so many people have come out of the woodwork to cheer me on or help when things have gotten really crazy. And it's been absolutely phenomenal to get to see other people's stories as well and to be connected with so many people that are doing the same thing I am. Because before I came to Substack, I didn't know any other independent authors. I
Right.
didn't know a single other one.
Yeah.
And it was really hard to be in like my outside of this platform friend group trying to talk about something that no one had any basis for. And now I can say that I know so many brilliant authors who are doing so many cool things, and that's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's a perfect answer there because I feel the same way. It's like as a platform, Substack definitely has a lot of issues. We could do an entire interview about that.
Yeah, that's a later conversation.
Right, but as you said, right, I always say that it's more important that the people that are surrounding you, like focus on the people, not the platform, right? And so, it's like you said,
Exactly.
I met yourself, I've met so many amazing authors, and like it's like my goal is just to keep the community that we have intact, keep it a safe space, you know. It's tough when it feels like the platform doesn't have your back, but our community is so strong that I feel like we have a good thing going here, obviously, because I talked to so many people like yourself who've had great experiences, met so many awesome people. I myself never had a writing community of any kind until I joined Substack, so for that reason, it's like I really try to protect what we have, at least like you said in our corner of the community. So I think that's a fantastic answer. Next up here, I want to go ahead and shift the focus towards your book, The Serpent's Rise. Wanted to kind of have you tell us a bit about it, obviously, for people who aren't aware what it's about and everything. And then kind of, you mentioned the audiobook as well. I'd love to hear about like the Kickstarter and the audiobook's progress too, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, The Serpent's Rise is about a 12-year-old Mahwal, which is a shapeshifter. And he happens to have like a serpentine shapeshifter ability. So, he's a little sneaky snake. And he is living in what's called the Underside, which is the secret monster society that kind of just underlays all of our living existence. But of course, it is a secret.
Hmm.
So he's a little bit too human for the monsters and a little bit too monster for the humans.
Right.
And so he finds himself in this gray area between the two, and he has to walk the line between them
Hmm.
in terms of the audiobook. So that has been in production for just a couple months now, and we're almost in the final stretch. So we're on the third and final draft, and then that'll go to final editing and final mastering. But that was like a huge undertaking of a project because I really had to put myself out there. And it's hard to beg for money on the streets, is like how I felt kind of going around
Right.
to all of the different platforms that I'm part of and being like, hey guys, I really can't do this without your help.
Mm-hmm.
And it was incredibly touching how many people kind of stepped up and were willing to donate to see it realized.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it is a testament both to the community itself and also, like on some part, just the work that I've put into sort of realizing this vision that people trusted me
Yeah.
in order to materialize it. And so the faith that people had in me by supporting the project was really heartwarming.
Mm.
And I got a phenomenal narrator. His name is Virgil Thornton II.
Mm.
And he has previously been independent. So this is his first long form project as well.
Mm.
So we've been learning a lot of lessons together.
Yeah.
But we also, in my opinion, work really well together.
Mm.
So one of the things that I've loved about it so much is the fact that I almost never have to give him narration direction
Mm-hmm.
because he reads the words in the cadence that I intended them.
That's great.
And I just think it's so neat and so special. And I get to see this whole thing kind of come to life. So we actually do have a release date at this point,
Mm.
which is super exciting, but very nerve-wracking. So the official public release date of the audiobook is June 15th.
Nice. Wow. Okay. That's amazing. Wow.
Thank you. It's coming up fast.
Yeah.
So
That's amazing. Wow, wow, wow. And I'm guessing it'll be available kind of everywhere you typically find audiobooks.
yes, that is the plan.
Okay.
The only thing is that it won't be on Amazon
Okay.
because Amazon has this fun little thing where they're like, you can only have an audiobook if you have an ebook. And I
Mm.
don't have an ebook because I won't go through KDP.
Mm.
So I have the ebook on every other platform,
Okay.
but not on Amazon. And they also do this fun little thing where they start reading your print books like with AI.
Mm.
And I'm like, no, I'm done. So they have
Yeah.
my print book, and that's all that they have. Uh, but every other platform should have it.
That's totally fair, and I completely agree. Yeah, yeah, I have very similar feelings about Amazon and some of the things they do. So yeah, totally understandable, but very exciting to hear that it is right around the corner here. That is incredible. I assume this is your first time working on like an audio production of your writing, right? Am I correct in assuming that?
Yep, this is the first time.
Yeah,
So the podcast was sort of like the soft launch into this
right.
so that I could learn more about the process of all of it and sort of what it would entail, and that I could get my own audio editing skills back up to snuff. I used to do audio editing back in undergrad a little
Mm.
bit
Okay.
for like commercials and stuff that we were putting out on social, it was a whole thing.
Yeah.
But now I'm working with these like longer and longer form mediums, and
Mm.
then of course, like producing the actual audiobook. And so it's been a different experience, but a very good one.
Yeah, 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 yeah. The reason I ask is because I've talked to other authors who, like kind of had an audiobook version of their work done or an audio kind of production done for their work. As you know, I work with a company called Audio Mazes, so I spoke to a few of those authors, and I always hear these amazing, heartwarming stories about the first time an author hears their works narrated by like a professional sort of narrator and voice actor. So what was that experience like for you? You know, like after you connected with this narrator that you're working with and you heard the reading for the first time, like what was that moment like?
It was very, I think almost jarring
Jarring. Okay.
because, yes, because it felt almost like somebody wearing my clothes
Mm. Yeah.
in like a weird way, just
Yeah.
because it had been something that was so close to my heart that I guarded so carefully for a year and a half before the book was published.
Mm-hmm.
And so to hear kind of like somebody else stepping into the world, at first to me, I kind of like panicked just a little bit. But it was also really, really cool.
Yeah.
And like the longer that I listened, and once I got over that sort of initial like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
um, I just could not stop smiling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like there was that first like sort of like fight or flight moment, and then I think by like the third minute, I was just like beaming ear to ear.
Right, right, right. No, that makes a lot of sense. I like the metaphor there, like you said, somebody else wearing your clothes. You know, it's almost like an uncanny feeling. You're like, whoa, what is this? You know, it's
I'm like, how did you know about this? I know I sent you the script, but how did you know?
No, I love that answer. That's great. I love that. All right. So, yeah, also I wanted to ask, you're obviously working on book two of this of the series here. Do you know how many books you have planned total for the series?
This is a loaded question. So, The Serpent's Rise is currently slated to be 3 books.
Okay.
However, however, that is not going to answer even half of the questions that
Okay.
have already been posed in this series.
Yeah.
Because in order to see how we got here,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of have to go a little bit back in time,
Okay.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
so there is a secondary series after the Age of Monsters,
Mm.
and it's called The War of Fates.
Mm. Okay.
And that's when we go back to the Alta and we see how all of those events transpired and what ultimately ended the Age of the Gods.
Wow. Okay, that sounds amazing.
Haha, thank you. It is going to be tragic to
Yeah,
the
it sounds like
storyline. Yeah.
it.
Ooh, but we're gonna work on it, and it's gonna
Yeah.
be a lot of fun, and it's totally gonna be great for kids, I promise. Somehow we'll get it there.
Yeah, but that makes a lot of sense, though. I mean, from what I've read of your work, it's like this is a very rich world. It's based on very rich, mythology. So it makes sense that you would have kind of, multiple sort of story arcs and series kind of happening here. I love the idea of going back. I'm always a big fan of that. I like that a lot. Cool.
And I
Okay.
think with my like historian sort of lens,
Yeah.
I can't just be like, here are the facts. This is what's going on. Self-contained storyline. I'm like, no, 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 no. Generations back, once upon a time.
Yeah, exactly. Like, get comfortable. We're just getting started.
Literally, buckle up, kids. This is a wild ride.
I love it. That's fantastic. All right. Well, yeah, next up, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about, kind of your experience, with all the projects that you're working on. So, as you and I kind of discussed prior to the interview here, I had seen a note that you posted on Substack, and you were, kind of just talking about how, like, you have a lot going on, you're feeling overwhelmed, right? I think I myself really connected with that. Like, oh, you know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like, as writers, we get so excited about our projects and we get excited about new opportunities and we quickly find ourselves spread really thin, right? As you know, you have a podcast, you got your book, you got an audiobook, like, and there's even more beyond that. So it's like, how do you juggle all of this? And more importantly, how do you prevent burning yourself out? Which I don't think there's an answer, like a one size fits all answer. But I'd love to know just kind of your experience. Like if you could just kind of share how you're handling, all these different projects, anything that you've learned that might benefit others, and just kind of your general thoughts, about being a creative that has to juggle all these other things in life.
I have very recently sort of had a couple moments where I've had this like bubble up of frustration.
Yeah.
And with that, I sort of had to check in with myself and be like, this is your stress speaking.
Mm,
You're like holding everything so tightly that anything could be the straw that broke the camel's back.
I hear that.
And when you're operating under that level of stress, it is not good for anybody involved in the situation, and especially not yourself.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I've returned to is my own sort of like personal journaling practice.
Mm,
So I recently went to this like little bookmaking workshop and actually like made my own
wow.
mental journal
I love
so
it.
that I can kind of like, thank you. I can like sit down and sit with my thoughts and put down onto paper like what I'm feeling in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been helping me sort of like sift through things and also come to realizations that I wasn't really noticing because I was just in go, go, go mode. And I think that it comes down to budgeting more time for self-care and to remember that the work can't be your first priority. You have to be your first priority
Mm-hmm.
because at the end of the day, the work doesn't get done without you.
Right.
I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to get book two written as quickly as humanly possible.
Mm-hmm.
And when it wasn't really gelling or coming together the way that I was hoping, I was getting like really frustrated with myself. And I was like, well, I was able to hyper focus on the first one. Like, what's the problem?
Mm-hmm.
And as I was like really like sifting through and thinking about it, what I realized was that you lose yourself a little bit when you create another world
Yeah.
because you are not living in your own reality, you're living in the reality that you're creating.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, when you start losing touch, at some point it becomes hard just to like, get through the day to day because everything is happening around you and you're not part of it.
Mm.
And so for me, it was recognizing for myself that I was needing a break from, Jordan Casillas, especially the second book, that I needed to like put just a little bit more distance to let those ideas germinate,
Mm-hmm.
and that my time was best served getting the first book into stores, working on my marketing. It
Mm-hmm.
was, better served publishing the oral anthology that's due in October for the hometown that I grew up in.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So it was also with this, like audiobook project that needed immediate attention. And so giving myself the permission
Mm-hmm.
to wait
Yeah.
and giving myself the permission to have things be a little bit more spaced out and not have everything at once. And that's hard when you're used to working very, very hard for everything so that it's right there when you need it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, burnout happens when you're not taking yourself into proper consideration. And I
Right.
realized that that's exactly what I was doing.
Right, 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 right. Yeah. Yeah, I really, really appreciate kind of your perspective on this. Honestly, I heard a lot of things I needed to hear just now. So I know that people listening are gonna definitely connect with what you were saying just now. And honestly, I completely agree. It's one of those things where I love what you said about getting lost in your own world and not being present in the world around you and kind of like that all is like passing you by. They always say you can't force creativity, so obviously taking breaks and stuff is important. I always say that rest is a part of the creative process, and I'm sure you would agree, right? Like there has to be that space in there. So yeah, no, that's a really, really good perspective. I appreciate that. So from my next question here, I wanted to just ask about any other projects or writing goals that you have this year in 2026. Like obviously you've got a bunch of things in motion that we already talked about, but yeah, are there any other kind of interesting projects that you've got planned or any like big milestones planned for the year that you want to share with listeners?
Well, so this October is actually my 30th birthday. So
Nice.
very excited about that.
Yeah.
And by my 30th birthday, I plan to have two books published.
Love it.
So Jordan Casillas and the Age of Monsters as well as this like oral anthology that I was just talking about of like the myths and legends of my hometown. And that's been like an ongoing co-authored project for the last 4 years.
Cool.
And so to finally get that across the finish line is going to be huge for me. So that's awesome. But also just sort of expanding my own publication imprint because at this point, I'm what you would call a full service publication house.
Right.
You know, I do the formatting, I do the cover art illustration, I do the graphic design, I do the marketing, like it's all me.
Yeah.
And that's been really, really awesome. And so maybe sort of expanding that just a little bit because I do have my own imprint and just like seeing what where else I could go with it. So obviously by June, Jordan Casillas will be a print book, an audio book, and an ebook.
Love it.
And seeing all of that sort of grow and spiral into different directions has been really cool. But also I'm currently in the running for a couple of independent awards as
Ooh.
well.
Okay.
So I'm really hoping, I'm like crossing everything,
Yeah.
that we're going to see something come of that. And other than that, it's really just cranking out the wins as they come. We recently hit 150 books sold
Wow.
in
Amazing.
6 months flat, which is
Wow.
crazy.
Yeah.
And it's also market season. So
Mm.
I'm going to be at several vendor markets. I have a ton of pop-ups scheduled all throughout the summer and like early fall. And so it's just kind of nonstop, but very exciting to see.
Good stuff. That's amazing. Yeah, a lot more. You've already had so many victories this year coming up, and then now you got even more before the year's out, headed your way. I love it. I also actually just restacked one of your notes right before our interview. That it was a photo of your book in a bookstore, which was amazing. Uh,
Yes,
yeah,
that
that,
was like that was an anthology of persistence on
yeah,
my part.
yeah,
Um, it's this really cool local bookshop that props up indie authors and has like a really competitive split with them. And so that's super amazing. And I dropped in like probably 3 or 4 times and
yeah,
it's just like, hey, remember I exist.
yeah.
And they were in the process of renovating and like hiring new staff. But I just made myself a persistent problem in their lives until eventually they were like, yes, here's your bookshelf and here's your author event. And do you
Good.
want it on flea market day when everyone and their mom is out? And I was like, yes, of course I do. Thank you.
Oh, that's so amazing. Gosh, it has been so wonderful just watching your journey, on Substack, like kind of seeing the updates. Obviously I've got a copy of your book over here with my other Substack author books. I'm very proud to have a copy of it. And yeah, it's just really awesome to see. It's been a very inspiring kind of experience watching your journey and all these amazing milestones that you're reaching, one after another. It's amazing. So, last question here. This is the one that I ask every guest on the show. What is one piece of advice that you would give to a writer or artist, since you're an artist as well? What's a piece of advice you would give to someone who's just starting out on their creative journey, or maybe they've kind of left their creative side for a long time and they're coming back? What's some advice you would give them?
Nobody's going to do it for you.
Mm,
And if you have something that you are so intent on sharing with the world, it's probably worth telling.
mm,
And one of the things that makes me really sad to see is when folks don't believe in themselves or the work that they've put into a project. And I think a lot of times as creatives, it gets very easy to be bogged down by negativity,
yeah.
especially when you do face so much rejection in
Mm,
this industry.
yeah.
But if you have something to share with the world, you can't give up on it, and you can't expect anybody to hand you your dream.
Mm,
You have to go and make it happen.
right. 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 I love that. I love that. Wonderfully said and extremely, extremely good advice. Yes, I agree. I agree. All right, my friend. Well, this has been amazing. I've been so excited to have you onto the show. Thank you again for, coming on here and making the time to talk with me. I cannot wait for people to hear this interview. Like I said, it's been a long time coming, and I can't wait to see how far you'll go. I mean, you've made so much progress in just the time that I've known you. So this is truly amazing. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you. I just want to say before I leave, very sappy, but I just want to thank you for everything that you've done for my publication and for so many others because you really are pillar of this community and in some ways the glue that really holds everybody together. So thank you for all that you do and for all the work that you've put into this as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Thank you. All right. And a huge thank you to LM Cypher for coming on to the show. That was an amazing interview. So many just incredible takeaways, lots of insights into how to approach mythology and other cultures in your work. I mean, the list goes on and on. That was a great interview. And I, for one, learned a ton as well. So thanks again to LM Cypher. All right. Let's talk about next week on Substack and, of course, my weekly novel update. So, starting off, going in chronological order here, tomorrow, Saturday, will be our next power-up prompt, and based on if they're able to work on it this week, I will be featuring a prompt from a guest author, so stay tuned for that. Last I checked the poll, we were tied for romance and sci-fi, so we might go with that. But yeah, stay tuned. Tomorrow, of course, new power-up prompt, as always. And then, of course, moving into next week, on Tome Tuesday, I'll be releasing the next chapter of The Order of the Pawn, the ongoing series set in my fictional fantasy sci-fi realm of Devine. In this next chapter, we're going to take a look at what's happening in the future. As you know, in the last few chapters, two of the characters got sent back in time in a last-ditch effort to stop the rot from ever reaching Devine. Now, of course, that will continue to play out, but we have to see what's going on with our other characters because we can't leave them hanging now, can we? And this coming week, I'm also going to be prepping for my next writing challenge, The Halls of Pandemonium. And I'm happy to say that I'm working with a even larger team this time around, including J.M. Gooding and Leron Haywood in charge of some brand new capabilities and systems that will manage all the scoring. It is truly, truly impressive stuff. J.M. Gooding in particular has put in a ton of time and energy and honestly magic into creating something special for us. So I won't say anything else just yet, but stay tuned for some details on that closer to the end of the month. All right, now let's talk about my novel update. So last we talked in the podcast episode prior to this one last week, I mentioned how my novel has been stuck because the outline is a bit too rigid with its 6 POVs. So first and foremost, my plan was to go to the outline and figure out how to tell a more organic story with these characters. And the goal, of course, with the 6 POVs is to capture a wide range of perspectives on the events that are unfolding, which have worldwide implications. So what I did this past week is a couple of things. Number one, I went ahead and started from the beginning, and I'm going to try to avoid spoilers here, but the first POV that you read, the first couple chapters of the book, initially it was only a couple of chapters, and then we moved right along to other stuff, right? Now, I had some friends of mine in a writing group read that first couple chapters, and while they enjoyed it, they said it moved a little too fast, which, to be fair, is something I tend to do with my work. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of go POV by POV, in the current outline. So I started coming up with some new ideas to sort of flesh out and let that first POV breathe. I want to add at least a third chapter before we leave them for the first time. But I may end up adding 2 chapters. Essentially, to give you some background here, that character is a female astronaut by the name of Alice Faden, and she is part of a small crew, and they are the only people on planet Earth, besides a few others in high levels of government and business, that know about the asteroid that is approaching Earth, that is a planet killer asteroid. She is part of a crew that gets sent up to the International Space Station to not only run samples on the asteroid, collect samples from it as it approaches Earth, but also outfit the International Space Station with a orbital defense system that is designed to, of course, shatter the asteroid before it can reach us. And again, normally that was only 2 chapters, and it felt like we were moving a little too quick there. So I'm going to flesh that out a little bit. I'm even thinking about possibly featuring a manned expedition with Alice and maybe one other character to the asteroid's surface itself, and we can get some of that cosmic horror flavor in nice and early. So stay tuned. That's what I'm working with now. Like I said, I'm going to go POV by POV throughout the book and figure out ways to sort of let it breathe, let the story organically play out, and not worry so much about every POV having an equal number of chapters, for example. And something that I did to hold myself accountable, in addition to these weekly updates, is I was with my weekly writing group earlier this week, and I asked them if they would be willing to review the outline with me once I have it updated with these new chapters. And they, of course, said yes. So in 2 weeks' time, I will be sitting down with them, and I'd be happy, if everyone's interested on the podcast here, to share with you all the feedback that I get. But that gives me 2 weeks to get the outline revamped, and I'll, of course, give you updates here on the show as well. And once that outline's ready, folks, you can expect me to be giving you word count updates. The current draft of the novel, I think, is 35,000 words. So we will give word count updates every week once this outline is done. Really holding myself accountable here. This book's getting done one way or another. But hey, that's all I've got for you guys this week. Thank you, as always, for tuning in, my friends. And if you enjoyed the show, do me a favor. Share it around Substack. Tell your friends about it. Saved as Draft is here on Substack, of course. It's on Apple Podcasts, it's on Spotify, it's on YouTube as audio. And I just would really appreciate it if you take the time to share it and spread the word. And of course, leave a 5-star review wherever you listen. It really helps the show find new listeners. And if you love the show as much as I do, then you want to see it grow like I do. So I would appreciate it if you could take the time to do that. But of course, as always, I'm wishing you a safe and productive week of writing. This is Bradley Ramsey, signing off.
Greetings, Bradley. I must know, did your readers enjoy the teaser image I made in Canva?
Yes, Lord Devereaux, I think they did. Are you excited for next month? I know we got a lot going on. It's a little scary, but it should be fun, right?
I am both eager and hesitant. The realm of Pandemonium is not one to be trifled with, but the riches within are very tempting.
Well, one thing I'll say is that if anyone can tame the realm of inspiration and chaos, it's this community.
Indeed. I do so look forward to devouring all of their new work.